Have you ever imagined a flood made entirely of beer? It sounds like something from a wild dream, doesn't it? But on October 17th, 1814, this extraordinary and tragic event actually happened in London. This wasn't a small spillage. It was a colossal wave of dark brown porter beer, a popular drink of the time. The scale of it is hard to comprehend even now, nearly 2 centuries later. This strange disaster unfolded in the bustling parish of St Giles, an area known for its densely packed housing and impoverished communities. It was a place where life was already tough for many, and this event would bring unimaginable sorrow. The source of this bizarre flood was the Moo and Company Brewery, a well-known and very large brewing establishment. It was located on Tottenham Court Road, a major thoroughfare then, as it is now. The brewery was famous for its porter, a dark, strong beer that was incredibly popular across London and even exported. To produce such vast quantities, Moo's Brewery had some of the largest fermentation vats in the entire country. These weren't just big barrels. They were monumental wooden tanks, towering structures capable of holding immense volumes of liquid. Imagine a wooden container several stories high, filled to the brim with beer. That gives you an idea of the scale we're talking about. The brewery was a significant landmark in the area, a symbol of London's industrial might and its thriving brewing trade. Porter beer itself was a staple for many Londoners, seen as a nutritious and safer alternative to the often contaminated water available at the time. The Moo Brewery had been operating for many years and its production capacity was enormous. One particular vat, the one that would ultimately cause the disaster, was truly gigantic. It stood over 22 feet tall and was said to hold more than 135,000 imperial gallons of beer. That's equivalent to over 1 million pints. This vast quantity of beer fermenting within these huge wooden structures represented a significant industrial operation. The sheer pressure exerted by such a volume of liquid on the wooden staves and iron hoops of the vats was immense. Regular checks and maintenance were, of course, part of the brewery's routine. However, in the early 19th century, engineering knowledge and safety standards were very different from what we expect today. The understanding of material stress and structural integrity was still developing. And sometimes the limits of these giant constructions were unknowingly being pushed too far, setting the stage for a truly unique and devastating accident. The fateful day was Monday, October 17th, 1814. It began like any other autumn day at the Moo Brewery. Workers were going about their usual tasks, overseeing the brewing process that had made the company so successful. Inside the brewery, the enormous porter vat, filled with thousands of barrels of beer that had been maturing for around 10 months, was a familiar sight. This particular vat was held together by massive iron hoops, crucial for containing the immense pressure of the fermenting liquid within. However, on this day, one of these vital iron rings suddenly snapped. This was a serious warning sign. Around an hour after the first hoop failed, the unthinkable happened. The immense pressure from the vast quantity of beer proved too much for the weakened structure. The giant wooden vat burst apart with incredible force. Witnesses described a sound like thunder or a cannonade as the timbers splintered and the iron bands shattered. The sudden release of over 135,000 gallons of porter beer was catastrophic. This initial rupture created a powerful wave, a torrent of dark, strong-smelling liquid that surged through the brewery building itself, smashing everything in its path with unstoppable momentum. The disaster didn't stop with just one vat. The force of the initial beer wave was so tremendous that it caused a domino effect within the brewery. Several other smaller vats and casks nearby were struck by the rushing liquid and debris, and they too were smashed open. This added hundreds of thousands more gallons of beer to the already rampaging flood. In total, it's estimated that somewhere between 135,000 and 323,000 imperial gallons of beer were unleashed. This wasn't a gentle flow, it was a destructive deluge. Several feet high in places, sweeping through the brewery walls and out into the surrounding streets. The brewery was situated in a densely populated poor area known as the St Giles Rookery. The streets here were narrow and the houses were often poorly constructed, many with basements where entire families lived. The beer, having burst out of the brewery, now had nowhere to go but into these low-lying homes and lanes. The topography of the area, combined with the sheer volume of liquid, meant that the floodwaters, or rather beer waters, quickly inundated the neighborhood. The frothy dark tide carried with it debris from the brewery timber, metal hoops, and anything else that had been in its path. The immediate impact on the community of St. Giles was devastating and horrifying. The wave of beer, estimated to be up to 15 feet high in some places, crashed into the poorly built houses and tenements with terrifying force. Walls crumbled, and buildings collapsed under the sudden, immense pressure of the liquid. People living in basement dwellings were particularly vulnerable as the beer rapidly filled these subterranean homes, giving occupants little to no time to escape. The scene was one of utter chaos, with screams and cries for help mixing with the roar of the collapsing structures and the strong, pervasive smell of porter. Tragically, lives were lost in this bizarre disaster. 8 people are officially recorded as having died, though some historians suggest the number might have been higher due to the transient nature of the rookery's population. Most of the victims were women and children. For example, a mother named Mary Banfield and her young daughter Hannah were taking tea in their basement home when the beer wave struck, and they were both drowned. In another house, a wake was being held for a young boy who had died the previous day. The beer flooded the room, killing several mourners, including a 3-year-old girl named Sarah Bates. Beyond the fatalities, many more people suffered injuries. Some were crushed by collapsing debris, while others nearly drowned in the sticky, dark liquid. The streets became impassable, filled with a mixture of beer, mud, and wreckage. Rescue efforts were hampered by the conditions and the sheer shock of the event. Imagine trying to navigate through a waist-deep river of strong beer, littered with broken furniture and building materials, desperately searching for survivors. It was a nightmarish scenario for the residents and for those who rushed to help. The destruction of property was also extensive. Several houses were completely demolished and many others were severely damaged, leaving numerous families homeless. Their meager possessions were swept away or ruined by the pervasive beer. There were also reports, perhaps embellished over time, but reflecting the desperation of some people trying to scoop up the free beer in any container they could find, or even drinking directly from the streets, though this was likely a minor aspect amidst the wider tragedy. The primary immediate effect was one of profound shock, loss, and displacement for an already struggling community. In the days following the Great London Beer Flood, the full extent of the tragedy became clear. The smell of stale beer hung heavy over St. Giles for a long time, a constant reminder of the disaster. An official inquest was held to determine the cause of the deaths. Remarkably, the coroner and the jury returned a verdict that the victims had died by an act of God. This meant that the Mew and Company Brewery was absolved of any legal responsibility for the deaths and destruction. Consequently, the brewery did not have to pay any compensation to the victims' families or those who had lost their homes and livelihoods. The brewery itself faced significant financial losses due to the destruction of the vats and the massive quantity of lost beer. However, they were able to petition Parliament for a rebate on the excise duty they had already paid on the beer that was destroyed. This petition was successful and they received a substantial sum back from the government, helping them to recover financially. This stood in stark contrast to the complete lack of financial aid for the impoverished residents who had suffered the most direct and tragic consequences of the industrial accident. Public sympathy was with the victims, but official support was limited. One rather macabre piece of trivia from the aftermath was that the ruins of the brewery and the affected houses became something of a morbid tourist attraction. People reportedly paid to view the site of the disaster, a common practice in an era before widespread media could bring such events directly into people's homes. The story of the beer flood also spread far and wide, becoming a peculiar footnote in London's history. It highlighted the potential dangers of large-scale industrial processes located in densely populated urban areas, though significant regulatory changes were slow to come. The Great London Beer Flood of 1814 remains a unique and tragic event. It serves as a stark reminder of the unforeseen consequences that can arise from industrial ambition, particularly when safety measures are not robust enough. While the brewery was rebuilt and continued to operate for many years, the memory of that day lived on in the local community. The disaster didn't immediately lead to widespread reforms in brewery construction or urban planning, but it stands as a powerful, if sudsy, testament to a day when a river of beer brought sorrow and destruction to the streets of London, forever etching its place in the city's unusual history.